opinions of living in a tiny house. What is it actually like? What do we think? I should touch on storage for a moment. We came from a 1,400 square foot townhouse with a packed garage.
You know, I'm scrolling through Reddit looking at plumbing setup.
For the last 3 months, I'm kind of thinking about it. Sometimes I feel like we're in a glorified hallway. At least we can always find the cats. I don't want to call them cons, but just things to note.
Considerations.
Hello everyone, welcome back to another tiny house video. My husband Jared is with me again today.
Hello.
Hello. We have been living in our 28 by 8 foot tiny house for just under 3 months now. We thought that we've been living here for a long enough time span that it made sense to check in with our actual all-around opinions of living in a tiny house. What is it actually like? What do we think? Are we regretting our decisions? Are we wishing that we could run back down to San Diego? No, we're not regretting them. As a whole, we honestly love living in our tiny house. We love our tiny house.
Living in a tiny house is everything I pretty much expected it to be. I've stayed in RVs before, camping, all that kind of stuff, so I was ready for tight spaces.
I had not.
Yeah. It's roomier than I had expected because I had, low expectations, if you will, because I know how much stuff we have. And
we came from a 1,400 square foot townhouse with a packed garage.
Yeah.
I feel like some of the biggest concerns when people are thinking about moving into a tiny house is like, are they going to feel claustrophobic? Is it going to feel too small? I personally don't feel claustrophobic. Honestly, we're sitting in the master loft right now on our mattress. We're a little close. Bubby's 6 feet tall. I'm 5'6" for any sort of reference here. And even more space could have been generated in our master loft here, giving us a little bit more space if I'd gotten a different mattress. But I was obsessed with this mattress. I believe that the company's Brentwood, and it's certified vegan, which was one of my biggest selling points. But then it's also a flippable mattress, which I remember as a kid, whenever we'd have mattresses, it was a thing where it's like you gotta flip your mattress every once in a while because you even out your indentation. But then as we bought newer mattresses, we found out that you can't flip them all anymore.
They have pillow tops.
Yeah.
So it's not on the other side.
It's super comfortable, so we're very excited that we have it. But that could have helped out a little bit with the space in here. But as a whole, I don't feel like we're stepping on each other's toes. If anything, sometimes the cats get under our feet because we do have 3 gatos, if you guys don't know that yet.
It is a narrow walkway, so yeah,
yes.
They only have so many places to go.
Sometimes I feel like we're in a glorified hallway. Yeah. At least we can always find the cats. That was another thing being in a 3-story townhouse. If we didn't see one of them, sometimes we go into a panic like, where's the cat? Where is it? And we'd like run up and down the stairs, look everywhere, making sure everyone's safe and no one snuck out or something.
And
but here,
like on top of a cabinet.
Yes. But here we can practically see the whole space. That by itself is really cool. If you have kids, you aren't going to lose them in a tiny house, right?
And I think that comes down to design too. So like our tiny house, we feel very spacious in. Could there be a tiny house that you get that doesn't feel like ours? Absolutely. We wanted to make sure that there was a lot of light, a lot of windows. We did the 2 lofts on each side and then just kind of empty space in the middle.
With our tiny house, under the master loft is actually supposed to be a bedroom where we have the living room. It's supposed to be a wall that completely encloses in that space, but then of course that would make a smaller living room kitchen area, and I wanted a pretty good sized kitchen. It's like that wasn't really gonna work for me. Wanted the open concept, but I really enjoy being able to make decisions like that and design the space that we're gonna be in and install what we want to install. Where our finances were at the beginning of all of this, we wouldn't have been able to go out and buy the land and build another house from scratch, but our finances did allow to be able to get a tiny house and design that from scratch. So I really value being able to have that experience and be able to do that because, for me, it's one of my passions. It's one of my joys is designing things like this. I think that that's really cool that we were able to do that with this process. So that by itself, I love the tiny house even more. I feel like it has our stamp on it. Even our bathroom, I love our bathroom. The last place we had a good bathroom, but it definitely wasn't like this guy. So even just with the tub, it's a little bit bigger. I feel like it's more spacious, even though it's in a tiny house. It's finding joys in the little things.
Yeah.
Living in this space, we've definitely learned that we don't need everything that we thought we needed before. We have a 16-foot pod that is completely full of all of our things from our townhouse that we have in storage right now. It's constantly showing me all of the things that I was purchasing and I felt like we had to have that we just really don't need. Our clothes have been downsized a lot. There are a lot of things that I would just have but not use. Being able to take that out of the equation, it is a really nice feeling. And of course, I should touch on storage for a moment. There would be one thing where storage gets me a little bit. That could be due to the amount of things we have. That could be due to the amount of storage that we have personally installed in our tiny house. Because of course you can always install more storage, which we do intend to do as time goes on. And then we'll even have less things in here. So I don't even know if I should mention storage as a pro or con, because we're kind of in a flux with that right now. And I think that when it gets down to it in the end, we will have enough room for everything. That was Barney jumping, so don't mind the sounds.
Yeah. We've kind of found that if you have the space, you'll fill it.
Yes.
And when we
100%.
moved down here, we brought more stuff with us than we needed. So we've made several trips to the pod to put more stuff that we thought we needed in the tiny house into the pod because it just doesn't do anything for us. Living in the tiny house, maybe specifically with the on wheels part, the tiny house on a foundation, maybe some of this doesn't apply, but like I've just felt more responsible and in charge with our home. I need to know how to level it properly. I need to know how to hook up the sewer and the power and make sure that we're not, overloading the circuit. I've become very, very knowledgeable very quickly in a lot of trades that I had very little or no experience in because I had to learn.
But he loves learning.
Oh yeah, I love
Feeding
that.
off it.
I'm scrolling through Reddit looking at plumbing setup. It's been nice learning more about how the house works and being in charge of that. But on the flip side, you're in charge of it. So if something's going wrong with the water or with electricity, or most of that is something that you've got to deal with it. You got to call somebody and get them out yourself. You're not calling the landlord and he's sending somebody out, and it's
like the HOA.
Yeah, or the HOA. We were very much taken care of in our tiny house, I feel like.
In our townhouse.
Yeah. Moving here has made me realize how much more responsible I need to be as a homeowner when city life was kind of coddling me a little bit.
It's a good first step also for us wanting to be on our land and build typical size home. So being able to do this first in a small capacity before doing it in a larger capacity, it's just really good practice. Along with that, I feel like being in this tiny house, I have become a lot more conscious of the utilities that we're using, just from the water to electricity, the propane, because I'm seeing when we're constantly having to replace our propane tank. When we were running a lot more things off of solar, I was very conscious of like, well, it's going to fill up at this point and we can plug these things into it. And I'm watching the percentage of the battery change. We have our refrigerator plugged onto it, but sometimes it doesn't get enough solar, so we have to plug it into the house to get more power. It's just made me a lot more conscious of what power
means.
Of what all goes into it, how much power certain appliances use. Jared would always talk about how much power something took, and I was like, but give me something to compare that to, So we started comparing things to Vitamixes. Sometimes we would pull out something and he's like, well, this only uses X amount of watts or X amount of volts or whatever. And I'm like, all right, well, what is that? He's like, that's half a Vitamix. So
on full blast.
Right? How many Vitamixes would max out our power right now?
So our Vitamix is
1,500 watts at max power, and our 30 amp connection, I believe, is like 3,750 max watts. So that's 2 1/4 Vitamix.
We had 2 Vitamixes running full blast, and we tried to turn another one on. Somewhere on that dial, we'd trip.
Don't let that freak you out too much. This is, again, it's Vitamix on full blast. For example, we find that a lot of things, when you turn them on, they use a lot of power in the beginning, and then it drops once it's gotten its gotten its temperature. Even with saying that, we've run a bunch of things in the house at the same time. I just think that that's really interesting. I've never thought about electricity before, and so we've found ways that work for us to understand what it all means, how it's all working together, and it makes me appreciate so much more all of these things running. And I understand that it didn't just happen because of magic, like when you get an apartment, you go in there, everything works. It's practically just magic. You aren't really doing it.
Push the button and it's on.
Exactly.
I had no idea how terrible space heaters are for electricity.
Oh yeah,
they're off. A space heater that heats like 10 feet around is the same wattage as our Vitamix. It's 1,500 watts.
And if you have it on hours.
Yeah, if you're trying to, because the moment you turn it off,
Gone.
the cold just creeps right back in because it's a
Dissipates.
space heater. We swapped our space heater for our heat pump, and the heat pump uses less power at max output than our space heater did. So our power bill went down when I put a big appliance on here, and it keeps our house way more air conditioned or heated than that ever did. And I never would have known that if I hadn't been watching the solar drain on my power meter.
It's true. It's true.
Thanks, tiny house.
Even though we love the tiny house, of course there are little things here and there that I'm conscious of. They could be possibly a little bit better. I don't want to call them cons, but just things to note.
Considerations.
I love that. I miss, as silly as it might sound, or maybe you're like, yeah, I would miss that too. I miss being able to stand out of bed. Because as you can tell, like, we're literally sitting on the mattress. And that's just how much space we got. I have to, like, crawl out of bed, roll out of bed, if you will. And I've found that over the last 3 months, I'm kind of thinking about it, I miss being able to stand out of bed, being able to stretch out of bed. I just scraped my nail on the ceiling as I did that over here. But sometimes we will bump our head, we'll bump a hand as we're, like, sleeping or getting up in the morning. Never injured ourselves or anything along those lines. Nothing crazy. But I do miss that. And then I miss being able to, you walk in your room and sometimes you just, like, plop on the bed. And I miss that too. Yeah. So that is something where I honestly don't know if I think I do know, actually. Even knowing that now, I would not change our downstairs living room and have that be a bedroom so that I could still stand out of bed. There are tiny houses that we've seen where they have their small loft space underneath. And then it's a couple steps that go up to, it could be a bedroom or a living room space, but it's somewhere where you actually have standing rooms. There are a lot of lofts that have standing room, or they'll just even have higher ceilings physically. Our tiny house is less than 14 feet tall. So some are just taller than that and do give you more space. But initially when I was looking at designs, I didn't really want to have that little nook for storage because I felt like you'd have to crawl into it and it would become less of a hangout spot. So I felt like we were losing space and the cats wouldn't be in there as much. But I don't know. I think that I would maybe need to walk through a tiny house that was done that way to get the feel for it, to decide if I would have maybe picked that over the setup we had here. So we'd still have storage and then we'd still have standing bedroom space.
I think that design is nice. However, I think that maybe there'd be a moisture, moldy, something like that component because not a lot of airflow getting down in there. I could see that. It all comes down to design and what you're looking for. I think that
maybe you're shorter and it doesn't matter.
Hey, I'm 6 feet, so it's what you need.
Yeah. Another thing that I miss a bit are having places to change, which again, sound a little silly, but we have a lot of windows in our tiny house, which was a choice by us. Not all tiny houses have this many windows, so I think in that case, you'd then have more places to hide and change. But we have 2 big windows in the living room, 2 big windows in the kitchen area, and then it's the bathroom. For where we are right now, there are people living pretty close to us on both sides. So if I'm going to fully change, I feel like I need to go in the bathroom in this little space, changing, like I've quarantined myself into this corner where I was so used to being in our townhouse where we had 3 stories. I could practically change anywhere on the second or third story and it's perfectly fine. Yep. So I do miss that. I do. But
that will not be a problem on our property.
Exactly.
We designed this for being on our land.
And having no one right around us.
We'll have no neighbors. It won't matter if people can see in our windows.
It's just an above neighbor.
And even if they can't, it's so far away, like...
Just don't tell me you saw in my window, Just don't tell me. Don't make eye contact while it's happening.
Yeah. And some people might say get curtains, but like we don't intend to get curtains or shades or anything.
I'm so stubborn on that right now.
So we definitely don't want to get them while we're here just to take them off when we get to our property. Doesn't make sense.
So the bathroom's the changing zone.
But one thing to consider, smaller windows or window placement or whatever.
Right. Or just, maybe know that if you aren't a brave changer.
Yeah. Size-wise, I do think that personally I would be more comfortable if we just had a little more, like 32 feet instead of 28. The reason we settled on 28 feet is because we weren't sure how much space we were going to need to be able to navigate the roads to our property.
Yeah.
The difficulty of parking it on our property in the first place. Mm-hmm. Cost. Obviously, it's more expensive to get a bigger one. 28 seemed like a not too big, not too little balance. And now that we're living in it, I think that having that extra 4 feet might be really nice, or even 2 if we had gone a 30 instead of a 32. The only other thing that I felt the need to bring up, and we've talked about it in other videos before, is moisture and ventilation. I had, coming from California, San Diego in reasonably sized apartments, mobile homes, houses. I've lived in all sorts of dwellings. I've literally never had to think about moisture and ventilation. Maybe it gets stuffy and you open a window and it's like, okay, and everything's better. But like, it's never been, if we don't turn on the fan, moisture is going to beat up on the walls.
Yeah.
And then if we don't prevent that from happening, mold is going to grow in the moisture that collects at the bottom edge of the wall after that. It could be as easily as deciding to cook something for breakfast. If everything's closed up in here, all that heat evaporates the water's in the air, we can't see it.
Everything makes steam.
But as soon as that water finds a cool surface to touch, it goes back to water. Just like how a glass sweats, on a hot day.
We are going to have a video coming out. I'm not exactly sure when, but it is one of our intended videos to talk about the moisture, the mold, the mildew, how to combat that, what we've done. There are a couple...
What we're going to do.
Exactly, because there are a couple other changes we still want to make. So we want to wait until we've actually done all the changes and we can have a opinion of the full before and after before we dive into it. But that's definitely going to be a video because it's something that we've dealt with. And yeah, like he said, we've never had to think or worry about that.
Didn't know it was a concept.
Yeah, we've never had to worry about it anywhere that we've lived. But here, it's just been a different story. So like I said, we will dive into that in the future.
But nothing deal-breaking after 3 months. It's been...
We're happy campers.
Yeah, it's been a great situation. Highly recommend tiny house life.
If you guys are looking at moving into a tiny house, buying a tiny house, building a tiny house, anything with a tiny house, we would suggest it.
Yeah.
I would, of course, just look at it from the perspective of the things that you highly value in your home and try to build a tiny house to incorporate those things so it works best for you. Not every tiny house will work for everyone, but I think that a tiny house could work for almost everyone.
Yeah.
So,
and they're becoming more legal.
Yes.
Yeah.
We live in Sonoma County, but he was looking at Santa Cruz County, and they just changed their guidelines for tiny houses.
In January, they put a provision or a law on the books that basically allows tiny houses to be dwelling units legally for families. It can be the only thing on the property. It can be a tiny house on wheels. They just have to be skirted, inspected, and permitted every 5 years for safety. I don't know what those standards are, but
yeah,
I want to be inspected. It just has to be hooked up to the city too. So like, you know, sewer, electricity, whatever.
Interesting.
But
what if you have like septic?
Yeah, that works too.
Okay.
Yeah. So basically they're qualifying tiny houses on wheels as you would probably a park model mobile home. Because really, those are the same thing. On wheels, you just don't intend to move them very often. I don't intend to move this thing very often.
Get it to our property once, and then we intend to, if we're able, use it as an Airbnb on the back of our property once we have our home. But I also, because we're in an area that's prone to fire, I'm like, okay, well, if anything ever actually happens, we can just hook up our tiny house, put all of our animals in it, and flee. So that's another little thing there.
Yeah.
3 months in, still happy campers. If you guys have any other questions about anything tiny house related, feel free to ask it below. We have a couple other tiny house videos out and then more that are coming soon. So trying to get as much information out there as we can. We think it's a really cool option. And if more people are able to do it, heck, why not?
Yeah.
But we will see you guys next time. We have videos coming out every Tuesday and Friday. Tuesdays are vlogs. Fridays are specified videos on a certain subject. Most often tiny houses, but sometimes other things that are just like vegan, eco-friendly, sustainable, things along those lines. So we hope you have a great day, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
See you later.